Good place to start is reviewing the results from the survey. I actually took the time to do the survey at 2 different points during the collection period. So the first set I did was on December 4th. We got 22 responses, and then in the final set on December 10th, we had 61 responses. The one thing I actually want to show is that between those 2 time periods, it didn't actually change that much. These are unsorted just because they would sort slightly different. But I normalized the data between the 2 so that you could see the relative position of the early responses versus the later responses. And you can see that the bars really just glancing at it, the bars really just aren't that different. They came out fairly similar. And I sort of broke them down into like simple keywords so that it was a little easier for me to manage because the user stories are actually quite long. And this first set is showing the ones that only changed, like didn't change at all or only moved 1 position lower or higher. And you can see that most of them, at least half of them, fall into that category. And then there's another set where they moved either 2 positions or 3 positions. And then the last one is where they moved greater than 4. So there's a lot of movement in those particular ones. So some of the surprises for me in that was just that performance went down so far. Pagination actually went up. Pagination went down, performance went up. I'm reading them backwards. So this is the early data, and this is the full set. And the full set's all listing 63 responses, but there were only 61. That was a typo on my part. So I don't know if anyone has any questions about this sort of change in data stuff. I did sort the final responses, and we can see what people were most interested in. So I do have it as a graph so you can sort of see the relative position. I don't know how easy it is to read the labels underneath, but those are the short labels. So that context came out as the #1 result by quite a bit. And filtering by class type is also very high, which I will say that in the system that we have set up, we do already provide both of those, the context and the filtering by class type. We do the class type by allowing them to specify an entity class when they request the search by specifying it as a sub-authority. So that's just a technicality of how we implement it, but it is actually providing that filter by class type. The one that's, I think, going to be a little tougher is the doesn't exist. And that is because if you're doing a keyword search, it's really hard to say that something doesn't exist. If you're doing an exact match, then yes, you can say that exact term that you searched for does not exist. So that one might prove a little challenging. And so edit plus a link to the URI came out quite a bit higher than the edit plus a label. So I think that plays in interesting in that as well. And then we see something with the broader and narrower. I will make a comment here that we got a couple of, in the open-ended question area, we got a couple of comments about the fact that some of these sort of appear to be overlapping, and so it was hard for them to prioritize. So you have see the broader and narrower, you also have step into broader and narrower. And so some folks were commenting that that was a little challenging to sort rank stuff, having them be so similar. And so performance ended up pretty high in the ranking, as well as exact match. And then we move on to the second set, and I'm not going to go through all of these. I think we can, I guess I'll ask a question. Does anyone want to go through each of these in more detail, or do you want to look over it on your own? How would you like to proceed at this point?
Lynette, I'm sorry, I haven't looked at Slack for reasons I won't go into, but have you shared this link somewhere and I just haven't seen it, which is absolutely possible?
I have not. shared this. This is actually an Excel document on my computer, so I need to sort of reformat it into a form that I can publish this, because I did say in the survey that we would publish the results on a particular, at a particular location. And so I do want to sort of formalize that. This is the summary that I threw together on Friday. So I just haven't had time to move it to a more formal state.
Okay, anyway, where I'm going with that is I might have more questions or comments once I looked at it longer. But for example,
Sure.
on my screen right now, that text is pretty tiny.
Yeah, and I can boost it up, but it's, then you're gonna lose some of the, you won't see the whole thing, but I can definitely boost it up.
Yeah, I can read the text on the screen, but you know, just flipping back and forth between this and use cases on my own, just to read the, you know, match these up to the detailed use cases would be, having time to do that a little bit would be nice. And also if there are comments that from the survey, from the free text fields that you could share, that would be great too.
Yep, and I do need to tally those together as well. I will say that there is another format that I am sort of summarizing these in. Well, let me show you one other thing before I do that.
Lynette, can I ask a question? Can you, would it be possible for you to just send this, what you've done and what you've put in the Excel spreadsheet out to the rest of us, and you keep the formal one, but then we can at least see the results?
Sure, yeah, I can definitely do that. I'm sort of inclined to go ahead and put it in the page where, because the results of the survey aren't going to change. They are what they are. So I'm kind of inclined to go ahead and put them in the page where they're going to go out to the public, and just send you the link to that there. So I'll include things like this graphic. And then up above, you can see it's in a tabular form. So, and there you have the full user story is right beside it. So they're listed from in order, from the highest priority at top to lowest priority at the bottom. So I probably won't include the detailed data here, but I will include the sort order and then the graph on that page. What do you guys think about that? Should I include the data details or just the sort order? And then I'd also include the comments, the open field comments.
For me, the detailed data is not so important, but the overview would be helpful.
Okay. Yes, so I also started to comment that I have this other document that I've started pulling together that organizes things really more on a category-oriented basis. So actually, if I put this out, you'll get a better sense of it. So these are the headings that I do. And so I have the broader task that catalogers are trying to do, which is basically edit an entity and include external data. And then I have things related to searching, and identifies the type of searching that we identified in our user stories. And these are actually sorted on the priorities as they were based in the results. So just to look at that particular section, this is the basic way I'm trying to gather each of these. I give the short term that we've been using for it, and then I give a definition, and I try to give an example so that for exact match, it's saying that the letters typed in the search field will only match text that is exactly the same. And then it gives the example of if you search for cotton, it will match cotton, but it will not match Fusarium wilt of cotton or cotton leaf curl virus. And the priority from the survey did exact match as 1. And then I also list the catalog or user stories that are related to that. And if I can identify developer user stories or provider user stories that we originally identified that are related to that, I put those there as well. There are some stories under developer and provider that are loosely associated with this around providing content in general in the search results, but I try to limit these to those that are specific to that particular use case. So for example, under left anchor search, there were a couple of developer user stories that were very directly related to left anchor search and not to just search results in general. And so this still needs to be filled out. There's quite a bit of work left to be done on this document, but this is where I started. So there's what I was kind of surprised by, and I think I know why this happened. Keyword search is coming out at a level 4 priority. And I think that we didn't really have a user story that was specifically, I want to do keyword search. There's a lot of implication to keyword search in some of the user stories. The closest I found of a user story that we had that related to keyword search was the one that says, I know some keywords, other attributes related to the entity, but then it has this phrase that are not in the primary or variant label. So I think that sort of skewed this particular response, and it almost ends up being more of the advanced search type of user story than one that's specific to like a keyword search on primary and variant label. So that's one of the things that sort of came out of doing the survey and then looking more deeply at the results and going, we actually didn't have a user story specific to doing a keyword search. So I don't really know what to say about that. It's not in the survey, so we don't have good results, in my opinion, on this. So this priority level may actually be skewed, in my opinion. So then we also have the advanced search. So that is how this is oriented. So it's got things related to search. I don't know if I can make that wider. I don't think I can. And it also has, that's really annoying. It has, I'm going to go down this way instead. User stories related to primary data in the results. So that's going to identify the fact that we want a URI and a human readable label in in all the results. And then it talks about getting more results. So that's going to hit, if you got broader and narrower terms, then you might want to be able to step into those terms or do pagination, or I couldn't find it, so I'm going to go to the external site and do the search there. So those are all about getting more results. And the next section is about refining results. So that has things about filtering. And then we have a section on how accurate are the results and how to make an accurate selection. So that includes, sorry, I kind of scrolled fast there. That includes providing the additional context, relevant results, and transparency so people know what it is they're getting out of the results. And I did throw in there, determine whether the entity doesn't exist. But as I mentioned earlier, I moved that to the exact match search section because I don't think you can do that in any circumstance other than when you are looking for an exact match. And then we have user stories related to performance. And then we had a section where we talked about data management, changing the data to keep it up to date. And so the section after that, my intention is to put in developer stories that are just related to development. So there's a lot of user stories around consistency of data and consistency of APIs and things like that. And those are more related to how developers support the cataloger user stories than being directly tied to them. But I didn't want to lose them in this document. So I guess my question for you guys is, how does this format look for you? The ones at the top are probably the best laid out at this point. So the thing that I'm looking at is that I provide a definition, I provide a priority level from the survey, and then I show what user stories are related to it at the cataloger, developer, and provider level.
So I'm blown away. I just want to say I'm really impressed with the amount of work you've done in such a short period of time in going through this stuff. And I personally think I like this, what you've done here. I think it makes it kind of easier to follow some of the things. And yeah, I'm overall, I'm so impressed.
Well, good. I'm glad that this format works. It seemed to make the most sense to me to sort of group them together like this. And I don't know if others also have some thoughts, if there's something that I could do a little different that might make it even more accessible for folks.
Well, I'd love to spend more time with it. I didn't see the link to it until I was casting about to see if there was an agenda earlier this morning, so I haven't had a chance to do a thorough read. But I think the format makes sense, and it helps to draw out the distinctions between some of the use cases that seem like they overlap. I think seeing them this way is really good. And I think where you've added examples, like it will match on this, but not on this, is really key. And so like, thank you so much for elaborating on them that way. Because I think that a lot of this seems super abstract otherwise, and it's kind of hard to convey to practitioners otherwise. But yeah, like I think this is a good format. I think I can't give you useful feedback until I like give it a thorough read through though.
Sure, and most of this work happened this morning, so there wasn't time to sort of provide it in advance. But as you mentioned, there is a link to this in the agenda for today. And I did set it up so people could make comments on this. Part of the reason I did it, I have no problems if other people help work on this document. But part of the reason I set it up as comments, at least initially, is this link will probably get published in some other form. And those folks I would not want to be able to do editing, but should be able to make comments. So if anyone wants to help work on this, I can definitely add you as an individual who would have editing rights. So we can definitely have more folks participate in creating this. I was just trying to take a first stab at it just to get the ball rolling.
I think keeping our input to comments now might help to just keep it coherent. So I'm fine with that.
Sure.
This is a comment, Lynette, but I will also volunteer if that's helpful. But I like that we pulled catalogers and they're driving this or driving the priorities, and that you've given some thought about the the infrastructure use cases. Are we going to try to prioritize those separately, or let that be future work?
I think that's going to end up being future work because one of the things I should have put on the agenda for today is that we're actually tying up this working group. It was originally set to go through the end of the year. I do think that there's some follow-on work to be done, and anyone who can participate in the follow-on work would be excellent. I think this is going to be a good output from this group, having both the results of the survey and this document sort of summarizing things in a little more digestible format. And then it would be a matter of sort of putting out a new charter to orient ourselves around a new set of work. And since this really is sort of the last meeting of this year, which makes it the last official meeting of the working group, unless we want to meet one more time in January when everybody can come just to sort of tie things up. I think that other than that, we need to create a new charter to move forward. So that would put the developer user stories, if we want to do prioritization with those, that would put it in a next step.
Okay.
I do think that on some level, and I would be very open to feedback on this, but it feels appropriate to me to get the cataloger user stories, because that's what, to get those prioritized is the main thing, because that's what we're really trying to fulfill, is those cataloger user stories. And then what happens at the developer and the provider level is like, well, what do we need to be able to fulfill those cataloger user stories? And if it's a level 1 cataloger user stories, then anything that's supporting that would be boosted up in priority on the developer and provider level. I think the place where that might be different is when I get to the part where I start identifying the developer user stories that are really outside of the cataloger user stories, that are more around how the data gets structured and what format it's in, and those kinds of things, that then developers might have their opinions that are separate from the cataloger user stories, and those we might want to prioritize separately. Does that make sense to folks?
That all makes sense to me, and I feel like in our recent discussions about developer use cases, it seems like, you know, having this kind of input from catalogers helps to sort of rein in some of that, some of those tangents. So can you sorry if I missed this. Can you tell us more about what you're planning to do with sharing out these cataloger use cases and like the summary document? Are you looking to get more input from catalogers once this is all sort of put together? Because like I can imagine that there's sort of a, you know, even if the working group is wound down, I imagine it would be interesting to put this in front of catalogers and ask them, you know, do you see your feedback reflected in this? Is this what you meant?
Yeah, and I would be open to hearing, like, I certainly know we have the PCC folks, and if there's other areas where we should send this out and get extra feedback, I think that would be good. On one level, I have to say that having put this document together and sort of grouping things, that I could have structured the survey a little bit different to do something like focus in on, these are the kinds of searches you can do. Can you prioritize those, and maybe do it more on a Likert scale that does something from, you know, very important to not important at all. And I didn't want to do a Likert on all the user stories, but I think if we had them grouped by sort of these categories, I think that would have been easier to structure that survey. And so I don't know how folks feel about sending out a second survey once this document is complete that might tease some of that out and shift some of those priorities around a little bit for things like, for example, where I identified that we really didn't have any user stories directly related to keyword search. We might want to add one related to keyword search, and then that would give us a way to prioritize that as well. But I think one step at a time, I guess, is where I am right now. Is I'd like to get this document done in the format it is currently, and then I would see convening another working group and deciding how we would proceed from there.
This is sort of speculative, but I do wonder if you know, with these specific, the amount of specifics you've got nailed down here, whether instead of doing another survey, you know, doing some really basic wireframes and like doing sort of a focus group type of user research exercise might get more into the meat of things, like with a smaller number of catalogers. But I don't want to invent new work for us.
Well, I do think all that work would be, you know, start of the new year kind of work.
Yeah, when I look at both the results in the spreadsheet form and then the document digestion of the feedback and sort of turning things almost into epics, I keep looking for a thing where I want to push back on the cataloger and say, "Are you sure?" And part of that's just maybe my own personal bias, but also like Christine said, maybe presented with the question differently, they might prioritize things somewhat differently. I'm trying to think of a good example of this where I was like, oh wow, that was in the third category rather than the top one, and it sort of was surprising to me, and I wondered if it was the question, the way it was posed, or something else. But
yeah, and I also wondered if some of the, you know, the lack of keyword user stories had to do with assumptions about you know, having authorized strings that we already know or patterns that we expect, and whether some of the exact match use cases might actually be in part keyword use cases, just because, you know, people are used to vocabularies where they've sort of learned their way around, as opposed to something like Wikidata where things might be less in an expected form. Sorry, Stephen, I just realized I think I cut you off.
No, that was really great. That was a great point. And given what we know about the exercise of creating a lookup, we don't have, or if maybe I have this wrong and maybe we do have it, but the ability to say things that we don't want to search. So in the context definitions that we have, there's a decision about whether something's just display only, and that's part of that keyword conversation. There's things that we'll want to search and things that we won't want to search.
Yes. So,
That looks like C12, or, well, the positive of it, it looks like C12 there. Row 26 is saying we do want to search some things, but I guess implicit in that is maybe not everything.
yeah. And it is interesting because as I was sort of teasing through some of these, that particular one and the C22 with the advanced search are very similar. So it's giving the example of searching occupation and resource type. But I guess C12 might be more influential on the indexing, whereas C22 is more related to like a widget where you're actually allowed to specify what gets searched. But you know, one of the interesting things I say that, and that's how I interpret them, but I do wonder on some level how the cataloger was interpreting things when they were reading through the survey. And part of that's because these are, you know, I was a little worried about this when we put it up for the users, is that these are very wordy use cases. They're long, and it takes a minute to read it and digest it. I don't know how we could have made them shorter though, just because if you don't put enough information, then it makes it more ambiguous and more open to interpretation. So
Yeah, if we'd made it shorter, it would have been sort of a Rorschach test. I definitely did get feedback from some catalogers that I sent this to, that, you know, some of this, they weren't sure what we were talking about. And I told them, you know, pretty explicitly to, you know, if they have confusion about this, or if they just aren't certain to put stuff into the comments, because that's also useful feedback. That's not lack of feedback, that's actually feedback. But I, you know, I think every time you put a task in front of catalogers, they want to do the exact thing that they think they're being asked to do.
right.
Yeah, so I mean, I think this is necessarily an iterative process where we circle around a thing until we actually land on the same thing together. So
Yeah.
I don't think that's a problem. It just we just have to work through it.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I was actually, so at NLM, what we did was just the NLM, all the head cataloging. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people got together to answer this for NLM. And I was on the call with them when they went through it. And it was really interesting to me because they had questions. You know, they were like, oh, wait, well, what does this mean? And then they would, the 5 of them would kind of figure out what they thought it meant and then give an answer. And I tried very hard to stay out of it. Every once in a while I'd throw in a comment, but I really tried hard to stay out of it. But it was really interesting to me how they interpreted, and I think that they interpreted, unless I thought they were really going off the deep end, you know, I was like, okay, you're okay. But it was just interesting to me to see how they approached it. And but I think in the end they came around for the most part, they came around to the right thing. And where they really weren't sure, they really didn't, they put in comments. So I kind of thought it was okay what they did.
Yeah, that's good. I'm glad to hear that. That sounds like the process actually went basically well for them. If you had said they were really off base on most of them, I'd be like, oh, I don't know, we might have to just throw it out and start over. So
No, they just needed, in some cases, they needed just kind of talk through what it meant, and then they were okay.
yeah. Well, I'm not too surprised to hear that, just simply because even when we were creating them in our group, we had a lot of discussion around each of these user stories and subtle refinements to some of the wording as we tried to nail down what we meant by it. So it's not surprising that other folks would also have a similar process.
One silver lining I see from this is the harder ones are at the bottom. I don't know, like advanced search, maybe not rank order, but that I feel like that one's a little out of place. But some of these other things are, so with RDF being what it is and the ability to use any property you want, and not getting data sources to agree on those things like advanced search, deciding which fields you're going to search or which properties are going to be searched. Some of those things are just each authority is sort of artisanally going to have to make decisions about those things. Some of the shared practices seem to be easier and surfaced or prioritized higher. So.
Yeah, I did actually think it was good that the top two are two that we've already tackled, at least in our system. So that was nice to see. I will make one more comment. This last one, I think the wording on this one was funny because as you go across the graph, you'll see that last one just drops off dramatically. And so I don't know, it happened to be worded in the negative, saying, I do not want authoritative data to be automatically updated. And I don't know if that threw people off, because that one was really dramatically different in its ranking than anything else. So if I were doing a formalized survey, I'd probably just throw that question out and say, no, we just didn't get good data on that one. So I don't know, we've kind of gone through what I wanted to show folks today, and I'm fairly pleased with the feedback that I've gotten. So I don't know if there's anything else folks want to talk about today. We have about 20 more minutes allotted to our time. I don't want to just stay on the call if we've covered everything we need to cover. So I guess I'm opening it up. Are there questions that anyone else has before we adjourn?
Lynette, what do you need going forward? Like what kind of help? You talked about getting help putting documents together. I mean, I guess the question is, what do you need and how can we volunteer to help you with whatever we can?
Yeah, so I think on some level, it is kind of hard to have a lot of hands in a document when it's initially being put together. But the one thing that would be very helpful on this document in particular, and then once I put the page together where it's the summary of the survey results, is just other eyes on it prior to me sending it out to more folks. So to get sort of like a first pass of comments on this document would be very helpful. And I know that no one's really had a chance to look at this in much detail because, as I said, I just created it this morning. So, but I will, the link is included in the agenda, and I'm not sure I want to post it in Slack, just because there are a lot of people on our Slack channel that aren't actually members of the working group. And I don't, once we get a little more refined, I don't mind putting it in Slack at all. But in this initial phase of people making comments, it might be good to get it from the agenda. So
What did you say was the due date or, you know, expected turnaround time for sharing this out more broadly?
I think it's going to depend on how much work I get done and how quickly I get it done. Because I just have
I guess my question is really, in what time frame would you want help with this?
So I'm going to work on it this afternoon too, to see if I can't get like the first rough pass on the whole thing done. It may be a little optimistic to think that I would get the first pass completely done today. So I'm going to go ahead and try and do it today and tomorrow. I have another project I need to work on, but I want to try and get this to a place where I can send it to people to review. So if I get it done tomorrow, and if folks could review it later this week, that would be very helpful.
Could you just send out a quick email when it's in a position where you'd like us to do that?
I sure will.
Okay. And actually an email with the link.
Yeah, oh yeah, I'll definitely include the link in there.
Yeah,
the same thing for the other page, but I don't think the survey summary is going to be really. I don't think there's going to be a lot to change in that. You know, a few comments if folks see something that's out of order would be great, but I wouldn't expect there to be a lot to change in that one. Whereas this one is a little more open to interpretation, I think, in the way I put things together. So there might be more comments there.
Yeah, so if you could just send us emails when you know, when each of these things gets to their you know, a relatively stable state where you know, it would make sense for us to read through or comment on them, that would be great. And I guess I don't feel like, you know, you need to get this too polished. I think just if it's in the shape that, you know, that you basically want it to be in, we could jump in then.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Lynette, sorry, just to be sure that I understood, assuming that the document has already the use cases ranked, applying the survey result, you expect that we can read and comment the document, not changing the ranking?
Yeah, so this document, this is in Google Docs. And so this one is already set up. The link that I put in the agenda, you can already add comments to it. The other one is, at least in the end, is destined towards being in a wiki page, because that's what I advertised in the survey. So I'll probably put it, I think it's in deliverables. I thought I put a stubbed out page already. It'll definitely end up under deliverables. I have to figure out where I put it. Because I sent a link as part of the survey. So folks will be able to go to that page to see it. And so I could probably put it in a Google Doc just initially so that it's easier for folks to comment, because that's something I actually really like about Google Docs, is from a collaborative perspective, it's easy for other people to edit or comment and join it and participate in making things happen. Whereas the wiki, you could edit it, but it doesn't really, it's got some form for comments, but not inline. Does that answer your question? It was kind of a rambling answer.
Yes, thanks.
Okay. All right.
So can I ask, I'm sorry, can I ask one more question? So you see this group ending, and then the next group that you see starting would be for the people who have products. Is that what I'm understanding?
I have not. So at the start of a working group, I always create a charter, and I try to identify what kinds of things it is that we're going to do, what's the scope, what's the timing, so that people know what they're committing to. And I honestly have not thought through all the aspects of a second working group and where we would go. I just feel like there's more work to be done that this was an excellent accomplishment for this working group to have these deliverables that we have. But it feels like there's next steps to follow.
Okay.
There would be a new charter written with a new description of what the objectives of that particular group would be, and so that people would know whether or not that was something that they also want to participate and continue to move this work forward.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments?
No, except for thanks for putting all that together.
Sure.
Yeah, here.
Yep, indeed.
Here,
Thank
here.
you.
All right. Well, I hope you all have good holidays and see you in the new year.